This episode of the Golf Professional Growth Project is brought to you by Golf Genius Software. Less work, more fun, more revenue. You are listening to the Golf Professional Growth Project. My name is Dean Candle, and I'm on a mission to help you, today's golf professional, build the skills it takes to thrive at work and succeed in life. I'm going beyond the traditional education that focuses on golf-specific training and digging deeper to find the real skills, the methods, and the tactics that the most successful people inside and outside of our industry use every day to achieve long-term success. Thank you for joining me. There's no doubt that if you're a listener to this podcast, you're familiar with Golf Genius. In fact, there's a very good chance that you're a user of one of their products. As the last decade progressed, Golf Genius eventually emerged as the leader in tournament management software. Their client list is well into the thousands and spans the entire globe, and at this point, there isn't anyone even close to being a true competitor. But what you may not know is how this all started. The humble beginnings took place in the Philadelphia suburbs when a retired software exec wanted to write a program that would make planning the annual golf trip a whole lot easier. So Golf Trip Genius was born. As it became evident that Golf Trip Genius wouldn't scale at a level to sustain a business, its founder, Mike Zisman, targeted golf leagues at public courses and eventually recruited a local PGA professional to help get his foot in the door with Golf Genius at private clubs. Now, as one of the first customers, I remember seeing this product for the first time. No doubt the TV leaderboards and the event portals were a cool feature, but it was going to take some time before this little company could take down the bigger names in tournament management. Little did I know the level of determination, skill, and valuable experience that Mike brought to the table. And thanks to that, the efforts of 39 PGA professionals and the entire company, Golf Genius now sits on top. Yes, Golf Genius is a sponsor of this show, and I'm proud to have them as a partner. But I invited Mike on the show because I wanted to learn more about his story, more about his leadership philosophy, and how he plans to keep Golf Genius in its current position. As one of the innovators in email technology in the late 70s, Mike has seen the entire internet age come to life. From the outside looking in, it's been a privileged career, but not without an incredible level of hard work and dedication, along with more than his fair share of adversity. We pick up the conversation as we discuss where Golf Genius has to focus to ensure that it's not vulnerable to the competition. So here it is, my conversation with Mike Zisman, founder and CEO of Golf Genius. So when I think about Golf Genius these days, in the whole scheme of tournament software, you're obviously number one. You're this behemoth in tournament software. To me, there doesn't seem to be any competitors out there. So how do you think of the competition, and how do you think of vulnerabilities for Golf Genius going forward? And what are those vulnerabilities, if there are any, that you
the biggest vulnerability of any company is arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You get arrogant, you get complacent, you create room for somebody else. So, I teach about this topic somewhat down at Penn, and I often say that the arrogance is God's gift to entrepreneurs. If people didn't get arrogant, they just keep getting better and better, with no room for the next guy. So we work very hard at not being arrogant and working very closely with customers and listening to them. I think, in terms of competition, what happens is, if you've ever read something like The Innovator's Dilemma, competition comes in from the bottom. Like someone says, well, Golf Genius has been at this for 10 years. We're not going to go build the all-seeing, all-knowing tournament management system to compete with Golf Genius. But you know what? Maybe we can build a simpler system that's needed by people who don't need that much capability, and build a simple system. And then, as we like to say, come up your tailpipe. Just continue to add more and more functionality. So I haven't really seen those, but I would say that there's companies that specialize, for example, in golf outings, and do some nice things in that space. At the association level, Blue Golf, which is a neighbor of ours, both between St. David's Golf Club and my home, frankly,
right,
on the Lancaster Avenue, is obviously a competitor in the association space, PGA sections, national federations, including in Europe. And then in Europe, there are competitors like Golf Box, which is a pretty good product, more also in the association space. And then, in tournament management for clubs, there still are a few of what I'll call the legacy desktop-based products, like Viper from Perfect, Event Man, which was probably the most successful of that generation of products.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, if you want to look at cloud-based software, HandyComp, still has a product kind of strong in the Midwest. They're in Michigan, right? They're headquartered in Michigan. So there's competitors out there, but we're always very cognizant of who might come along next.
So as you were looking at this, and we can go back to the origin story, I think a lot of people probably know it by now about Golf Genius. But if you talk about needing to have this little niche to get yourself into it, would you say that for you, what kind of broke through then was it the live scoring or the TV leaderboards? You'd say that kind of differentiated you from the other products that helped you get in and start growing?
Well, I would say live scoring, yes. So yeah. There was a if you think about the history of tournament management in the U.S., first there was the USGA with their TPP product, which had one advantage: it was free. Well, it wasn't free, but if you were a GIN customer at St. David's paying your handicapping fee, you got TPP at no additional cost. So
right.
And that started the market. Then along came people like Event Man and Viper, Tournament Expert, right, who built desktop systems, not free, but very inexpensive relative to, say, the other software that you would have at a club like St. David's, whether it was Club Essential or Jonas or North Star Fortes or products like that. And they focused on the golf. They focused on the Dean Candles of the world, right, on the Golf Pro, making it more efficient to set up events.
Mm-hmm.
Loading a player roster, pairing scorecards, card signs, and scoring basic tournaments. It didn't focus on the member experience. Because I was a member at clubs, I focused more on the member experience and said, well, how do you make this more fun for the golfer and do it in a way that can generate more revenue for the club, mainly by charging more for outings for things like live scoring. So I would say, yes, it was, live scoring and leaderboards and having a cloud-based service. I mean, Dean, it's amazing. Sure. As you know, we survey our customers all the time and do what's called Net Promoter Score evaluations, and we do very, very well. But the score is not nearly as valuable as the comments. I read everyone every day. We're surveying customers every 6 months, so it's not like we're getting hundreds per day, but we get many per day. And it amazes me how often people talk about the fact that it's cloud-based and, I can work on it from anywhere. And it's a classic case. It's Friday night, you're at home. All of a sudden, there's huge enough the member guests, a whole bunch of people dropped out. You had others. Well, you don't have to get in your car and go down to the club. You log on and you make the changes.
Right.
The fact that it was cloud-based turned out to be a huge advantage for people that they liked. And then the member experience, things like live scoring, customizable scorecards and things like that.
And I think early on, from the customer side, the ability that Golf Genius gave us to provide a better tournament product for our members was big, but it might have been tougher for you to get the golf pros on your side. What's tougher serving, the general golfing public or golf pros and satisfying them?
The golf pros, are very exacting in their needs because they want to service the customer, right? They don't want anything to go wrong in that big member guest or member or stag day or whatever. And I mean, what the golf pro would say is you have to make it very fast and very efficient. What you hear all the time is too many clicks. There's too many clicks to get to that. People, I mean, that's a complaint about any web-based product, right? Because you got to have a hierarchy of functionality. So I would say the golf pros in general are, I mean, they're very fair. One thing is, I've often said to people, you probably heard me say publicly, is that, golf pros are very well trained in interpersonal relations, in merchandising. They run little businesses. They're business people, right? They run, and some of them still own their own golf shop. Most don't anymore. But, they're very, very well trained, and they're very, very professional in the vast, vast majority of cases. I mean, I've worked in enterprise software where you're dealing with the Fortune 500. And so you're seeing the broad array of human behavior, from very nice people to real jerks.
Right.
Not very many real jerks in the golf industry, to be quite honest. I mean, it's just, those kind of people aren't attracted to being a golf pro. They tend to be personable, fair, reasonable people, but you need to meet their needs. The golfers in general are pretty delighted by what we do they love the fact that they can be doing live scoring, see exactly where they stand on the tournament.
So let's shift and talk a little bit about the state of things this year. We're obviously sitting here towards the end of 2020. It's been a monumental year. We don't need to go into all of that, but one thing that I was impressed with when I heard how Golf Genius and you specifically were handling a crisis that we were dealt back, early spring, March, April. As far as I know, you made a commitment to, even though with all this doubt that there was, we didn't know what we were walking back into, what was going to happen with golf. We certainly didn't know that what was going to happen was actually going to happen. But Golf Genius didn't furlough anybody. You stayed committed to everybody that you work with. Talk about that decision process for you and how you viewed this crisis, back in March.
So we did two things. And you're right. Who would have ever guessed it would take a pandemic to reinvigorate the golf industry like it has?
Right.
Certainly not me. But
right.
I'm sure golf was up 20% September 2019 to September 20. At the golf equipment companies, can't get the stuff out of their factories fast enough. It's just reinvigorated a lot of very young golfers. But obviously, no one knew that, in February and March. And so, I decided very early on that we weren't going to furlough people, that we would, at least I said, look, you can never say never. For the time being, we're not going to furlough anyone. What we did that worked out really, really well, Dean, was I said, okay, we're not going to furlough anyone. So we have 100 employees. 40 of them are the PGA professionals, 39 who are customer facing, sales, account management, and support. So we're not going to furlough. But we're not all going to sit around twiddling our fingers. I said, this is the time to do all the things you always wanted to do, but didn't have time to do. If you've ever read, it's not so popular now, but there was a very famous book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Sure. Yep.
The last chapter we call Sharpen the Saw. That is, you have to go back and retrain and sharpen the saw. So that became known as STS at Golf Genius. We had a set of 12 Sharpen the Saw projects that said, you group of people, go attack this problem. And they were on a variety of topics, but some of them were on ease of use. Because I've always had a view, being in the software industry for a long time, that every time you add a feature to a product, you make it more complex.
Sure.
There's just more there, and even Dean has to look at it enough to go, oh, that doesn't apply to me. Right? Oh, that doesn't apply to me. So every time you make the product more complex, you have to invest in making it easier to use. So at least you're kind of holding your own. So what I love is if I look at a release that just came out last week, it has a whole set of usability features. Came right out of that task force. We have something coming out in our next release that is a fantastic improvement in usability. We had people look at our golf shop product, what should we do differently? And so it brought the company together, right? It was able to bring the company together on these projects. They would all report out. And, and then, I could show you a curve that if we compare, the way we measure our business is rounds played. How many rounds were played? So if you have a tournament, right, with 63 people play in it, that's 63 rounds of golf. You have a member guest, 100 people play for 3 days, that's 300 rounds of golf, right? So last year we did about 21 million rounds of golf, and it goes like this, right? It builds up through June and then falls off. But we were slightly ahead of last year, and it went like, literally, boom, it stopped. And then it slowly worked its way back up and now is above last year. And so we saw it picking up, after about 6 weeks, I would say. I don't recall exactly. And so we knew things were coming back. And then our support load exploded. It was much higher than last year because all of a sudden everybody's jumping back in. Hey, what's this WHS thing? What are these other features?
Right. That was supposed to be the most complicated thing this year was World Handicap. If we go back to January, that was the biggest thing we were going to deal with this year.
And actually, literally, WHS just launched last Monday in the UK.
Right.
3 days later, they put a lockdown in the UK. WHS was live for 3 days. I'm not even sure we posted any WHS scores. Anyhow, it was a very easy decision to say we're not going to furlough anyone, at least for the time being, and until we get some visibility. The other thing we did that I'm just as proud of is we went to all of our customers and said, look, clearly you're not going to get to use our product for about 2 months, so we're going to issue a credit to every customer equal to about 15% of the annual fee, about 2 months of use. It was about $1 million. So about $1 million of lost revenue to us. But I said, in the long run, it's the right thing to do. People aren't getting value. Value accrues from use. If you're not using the product, you're not getting any value. So I said, we're just going to do this. We sent out a note. We issued credits to everybody. I still think it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, especially going back to that time in the spring, because we're in the same obviously area, and a lot of us here in the Northeast had no idea when we were getting back and what it was going to look like. So to think about what kind of events we were going to use and what kind of usage we were going to get from Golf Genius this year, it might have been zero as far as we thought back then.
Now the other thing that happened, so we had this thing came out of nowhere, as you know. We decided to issue these credits to everybody, and that was well received. We decided to keep everyone on board and do these what we call STS projects. And then we also really focused on what's being called contactless golf. So we added features like play when you want, right? So you can have a golf leg, and it's not the usual, we go out at 4:00 on Thursday afternoon. It's play sometime this week. So that people didn't have to congregate at the same time. Obviously, the live scoring was a big piece of that. We introduced digital scorecards, to put into our app the notion of a marker and a player. It's very well received. And in fact, one of our largest customers, it's not well known, is the American Junior Golf Association. Very progressive. They stopped printing scorecards. They don't have scorecards. They went right to our what we call our digital scorecard. So A marks B, B marks C, C marks A. You see it right on, on our phone app. You're going to enter. I'm going to enter scores for Dean, and I'm also going to enter my own scores as the marker. So we added a bunch of features for contactless golf, and we've seen a dramatic ramp up in customers adopting our premium product in the U.S. and in Canada because of that. So, as I said, who would have ever guessed it would take a pandemic to invigorate the golf industry the way it has?
So what, in your experience, did you lean on, having none of us had seen this before, to be able to make these decisions specifically about the furloughing and just about how you were going to move forward with the company?
So I've often, counseled people that there's reversible decisions and irreversible decisions. Most decisions are reversible. Then work out, you can change your mind. Mm-hmm. Irreversible decisions you want to think long and hard about. But not furloughing people is a reversible decision. I mean, that's something we could do for a month and it would have a certain cost, or for a longer period of time. But I just, look, you manage people and you can always tell people, oh, you're great. We love you, blah, blah, blah. Then there's certain times when you can actually show it. And you can actually say in a very concrete way, we care about you.
Yeah.
We care about you. We're not, so I just want you to relax, right? So look, I can't say forever. I can't say we'll never do this, but I will tell you, we have right now no plans, and and moreover, we're going to implement these sharpen the saw projects to keep people, and we'll get a lot of value out of it. So it's not, so they weren't getting compensated to do their normal job, but they were being compensated for these STS projects. And every week we would all get on and review these projects, and they were very, very valuable to us. I often tell my kids, when in doubt, do the right thing.
Right.
When in doubt, tell the truth. That's always a good thing for kids. It's very tempting to say, no, I didn't get those cookies out of the cookie jar. Right. When in doubt, tell the truth. And more importantly, when in doubt, just do the right thing.
Yeah, and I think talking to golf pros specifically during that time is we all got to see, and this is, I'm sure with any company across the board during that time, you got to see truly if their money, literally their money was where their mouth was, right? Yeah. If their people are that important to them, then they did everything they could to make it right for them, and we saw that back in the spring. So I commend you for that.
Yeah, it was actually a very easy decision. We didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it. Like, we're just going to ride this thing out and see what happens.
Hey, golf pros. How many times have you dealt with a frustrated customer that was never updated on the status of a special order? What about the member that was never told his club arrived as it sat in the corner of the office for days on end? Have you ever wished that you could have a more foolproof special order process so that nothing fell through the cracks and your customers left happy and satisfied every time? Just think about how that could improve your sales. Golf Genius Golf Shop is here to help. Golf Shop is the only product on the market created to help your golf retail business communicate with your customers and organize your orders so you can provide the experience your customers come to expect in today's retail environment. Just like the big box stores and online retailers. Place an order, an email or text goes out notifying your customer. Update the status of an order, and another notification goes out. The order arrives, just click a button and let them know it's here. Plus, you can customize the notifications to match your specific needs. I'm always looking for ways to be more productive and save time. That's why I've been using Golf Genius Golf Shop since it was released last year. I love the efficiency it has added to our special orders. My members appreciate the constant communication, and our staff isn't bogged down sending emails or making phone calls every time an order arrives. I can easily check if an order is taking longer than expected by viewing the special order dashboard, which keeps me up to speed with any orders that need attention. The result is increased sales that come from more consistent, reliable, and efficient special order process. Put a stop to the endless questions about, did you place my order? Or is my order here? And get Golf Genius Golf Shop. For more info, go to golfgenius.com. So what's changed, if anything, of your vision for the future, either near term with Golf Genius or a little bit further? What has 2020 changed any of that in your mind? That we're obviously going to in a bit of a different world. Golf is booming, but you've caught on with this contactless is a feature that really took off out of need. But has anything changed, with your outlook?
I attended a webinar early into the pandemic. It was sponsored by the University of Pennsylvania, and it was about bringing all their medical people together to talk about what they thought was going to happen. But they also had this professor from Wharton, from Wharton, a business professor, who's kind of one of these futurists. And he was fascinating because his comment, which I've always remembered, is COVID is accelerating trends that have been incubating for a long time. Mm-hmm. So when you say COVID accelerated things like contactless golf and live scoring. They're not going to go away. Not going back.
Not at St. David's. I know that.
Not going back, right? People get used to it. So in our case, it really accelerated the adoption of live scoring, for example, and contactless golf in general. So, we've been fortunate. We're still, at our core, we have 11 years of experience building tournament management solutions. It's hard stuff. I've been in the software industry a long time in enterprise software, and I tell people this is actually the hardest software I've ever dealt with because it's so loosely structured. People have a tournament and say, but Mike, doesn't everybody do it that way? No, actually, you're the only people who do it that way.
Right.
Or, well, it's an eclectic. Everyone has their own definition for what an eclectic is. That's why it's called eclectic, right? It's different, it's strange. So, the tournament management piece of what we do, it's complicated. And you're doing live scoring on a Saturday in June. There's 160,000 rounds. Like we have 160,000 rounds of golf. Actually, this year, I think we may have peaked at 170. So 170,000 rounds of golf. Now, they're not all doing live scoring. But imagine for a moment they were. You have 170,000 rounds over a period of 4 hours, pounding in 18 scores and constantly looking at a leaderboard.
Right.
It's coming from the cloud and you're pushing out the leaderboard. You have people in carts, with live scoring in the carts and GPS in the carts. So it's to build that scalable software is very challenging. And we invest very heavily in the redundancy. It's very expensive. So we have almost zero downtime.
Yeah.
Typical quarter, we're up 100% of the time. And the nature of our software the nature of modern software is you really don't have to bring it down for maintenance. You put in the changes and then it just sort of restarts itself on new transactions. So, it's challenging. We keep investing in it. At the same time, we introduced a product for golf shops. It's been pretty successful. We're adding a bunch of stuff to it. I mean, our challenge is we're in the golf business. We have no aspirations outside of golf. We have 39 PGA professionals. They don't know a lot about tennis or soccer, right? We're not interested in being horizontal across sports. That's one constraint to growth. We also partner with people. So whether it's a Club Essential or a Jonas or a North Star or a Four Ts or a Club Car, we spend a lot of money integrating. It's very easy to work with those people when you don't compete with them.
Mm-hmm.
Start competing with them, it gets more difficult. They still do it because at the end of the day, we need to make Dean happy, right? So if we have to work together to make Dean happy, we're going to do it. But it's a lot easier when you're not competing. So we try to find what I call the white space. Where can we grow within the golf industry that doesn't compete, with all the partners we have? But we have, a number of things under development that fit that bill. The other thing that's happened for us in 2020 is that we really were able to more aggressively get to the National Association, the National Federation level, because that has a different set of requirements. So in a golf club, as you know, you live it, the golf tournament formats can be very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
You probably participate in PGA Philadelphia section events. It's not complicated.
No.
Field gross from the back tee.
Right.
You don't need a lot of software.
Low score wins. Yep.
It's all the membership programs and registration and payments and, when did you cancel? If you cancel within a week, you get no money back within 2 weeks. There's a lot of, it's very different. Membership programs and things like that. I'm sure you're involved in PGA Philadelphia. We've really refined that software over the past few years. We service a number of the PGA sections, including the Philadelphia sections. We're actually announcing tomorrow morning, so I will pre-announce it here. This probably won't play till after that. Relationship with Golf Canada. So we're taking over all the tournaments for Golf Canada and all 10 provincial associations.
Wow.
Earlier this year, we signed England Golf and New South Wales and Australia and Singapore Golf. So we're providing those services, at the national federation level, because every company wants to grow. I mean, you always want to continue growing your business, but we try to stay very focused. The core will always be tournament management because we've invested so much in it and have a very strong niche in it.
How frustrating was it as you were building the product? I would imagine that, based on your history, you've solved some complicated problems before. Just going back to your first company with, early email and we can talk, I want to talk a little bit about that later too, but were you surprised about the complexity of these problems in golf? And was it somewhat frustrating learning that, oh, wait, we have to make this so that you can run that silly event and you have to run that crazy event? And did you have to kind of get past that at some point? Or
we did, but I would tell you that's true of almost every sport. I think most entrepreneurs say, if I had a clue how complicated this was going to be, I never would have done it.
Right.
At some point, you're half pregnant.
Right.
You're half pregnant, you're in it, you keep doing it. So there's nothing unique to us. I think Steve Jobs made that comment about Apple at one point. Like, if we knew how complicated this was and going from the original Mac 2 to the Macintosh, they never would have done it. I would say that it's a journey. As you go along, you learn more and more about what kind of tournaments there are, and it's all about in the software business. Anytime you see something new, the question is, well, does that fit into the architecture we have? And it's just a little bit of work, or wow, that completely blows up the architecture. Like that, we just never contemplate anything like that. If you think about our product, we have the scheduling engine, which is what I wrote back in 2009 and 10, which is where my background was, which is very complex mathematical programming system akin to scheduling FedEx trucks and airlines. It's what's called mathematical programming. And I had
which, by the way, to hear you say that makes me feel better for when the guy came in the door and said, "Hey, can you set up this trip for me and make sure everybody plays with a different guy and everything?" And I couldn't do it. I know I'm just a dumb golf pro, but to hear somebody as smart as you say that,
people don't appreciate. I mean, that's where we got started, right? So we got started. I was always the guy organizing the annual golf trip, and at the end, Dee would come complaining and says, I played with Zisman 3 times. I don't even like him. And I didn't play with John at all. And by the way, you didn't tell me that, right?
Well, I'm the pro. I'm not allowed to say that, but somebody on the trip said it.
There's got to be a better way to do this. So I started focusing on the scheduling problem. Example I use is 16 golfers go on a trip, which is very common. Go to play 5 rounds of golf. In 5 rounds of golf, you will be with 3 other players 5 times. That's 15. There's 15 other golfers. You'd like to play with every other golfer once. Oh, all 15 other golfers want to play with another golfer once. So think about a matrix that has golfers in the rows and columns and how many times you play together. You want a 1 in every cell. Everyone play there at once. So, yeah, it's true. But, for 3 of those rounds, we're playing by teams. We're going to have 2 teams of 8, how far can you go and still have a perfect solution? So that was a challenging problem. And, and that's still a core part of the product for things like golf leagues. And then the tournament engine itself, we had to build it twice. We built it the first time and realized, that doesn't cut it. And then we rebuilt the thing from scratch again in probably 2013. And it served us very well, but you're constantly adding to it.
So what told you the first time that it didn't cut it? What mistakes did you make or what wasn't working?
So we just didn't contemplate the wide variety of tournaments that would have to be supported. And we needed just a different, whenever you build a computer system, you're building a model of what you think the real world's like, right? Here, we have golfers and rounds and players and teams, and you have what's called the data model, the data model that we think represents what happens in the real world. And when you get that wrong, then you can't do other things, right? And so you have to go back and, there's a sort of a view in the industry. You will always build it twice. Mm-hmm. Always build it. You're never. I think part of the success in the software and anything is being humble and realizing you're not going to get it right the first time. So there's this notion of what's called a minimally viable product, MVP. Let's get something out there. But I keep reminding people, remember, it has to be viable enough that Dean's going to take some time to use it.
Right.
Can't so little that guys, that's not worth it, right? So you need to get something in someone's hands. And then people, give you really good feedback. In fact, today, we literally, in our development cycle for any release, have a feedback period. We're going to get it out there. We know we're going to get feedback. We have that scheduled, and we're able to, react very quickly to the feedback that we have. Today, I would say our tournament engine, is very, very robust. But there's still, every time you think you've seen it all,
right.
Something else.
Right.
Something else.
So how involved are you still on the development side and the feature side? Is that really what we'd say the gist of your role these days, or?
Well, so I'm very lucky in that I have a co-CEO, Chris Kallmeyer, who joined the company in 2016. Absolutely fantastic guy. He's a real golfer. He's like a one index.
Good player.
One index 19 times. So he loves the game. In fact, we're playing at a first tee event Thursday at Walnut Lane, which is where Chris learned to play golf. Nice. Grew up in that area, East Falls, in a row home, and learned to play golf at Walnut Lane. So it allows me to kind of spend my time where I think I can make a difference, right? Which is on, the large strategic deals like Golf Canada, England Golf, and things like that, but still get involved in, certainly not in the coding. I haven't done any of the coding since 2010, but work very intently with the development team on key projects.
Mm-hmm. So would you say you're a little bit of a reluctant CEO? I mean, more of like, you want to build this product and see it to fruition, but as far as then the, leading the company, you're fine leaving that to a lot of that piece, that management piece, to Chris.
Yeah. I am. I mean, one of the problems in a lot of companies is that the entrepreneur can't let go, and then and therefore the company can't really grow because everything has to come through him or her. Everything is both an advantage and disadvantage. One of the advantages I have is I'm 71 years old. Right. I'm quite ready to like Chris.
Right.
The disadvantage is I'm 71 years old. Right. So,
right.
Bandwidth isn't quite what it used to be all the time, but I'm still pretty quick. No, I'm very happy. I've always believed in hire the very, very best people you can, set them on a path, and get out of the way. Let them do their job. So, it is very fortunate for me that with Chris, I can focus on the new product ideas. On, like we have a development call, still every week. And I'll be on that call listening and making suggestions. Have you thought about this? What about that? We just had a big breakthrough, for example, breakthrough. So, we had our mobile app, which you've used, for live scoring. Mm-hmm. And then we started working with the PGA sections. We had a different app for the PGA sections that was more oriented towards, here's all the events that are going on. You may use it in PGA, register for events, pay for the events. We were able to bring those together in the UK, actually. So we introduced a new app in the United Kingdom for WHS because they have special rules for general play. So I'll get involved in how do we bring these things together in a way that makes sense for the user. That's the fun part.
Mm-hmm. So take me back then to early career. I'm interested in this. Interested in early internet, and especially this. So your first company was Softswitch, right? Was the name, right? First of all, tell us just a little bit about what you created with that.
Yeah. So today, Dean, when you send me an email, like what I do this podcast, you didn't give 1 second thought to what email system I use.
Right.
You send it to Mike at golfgenius.com. You have no idea if I'm on an Apple Mac using Apple Mail, or on an Apple Mac using Outlook, or an Apple Mac using Gmail, because we all use the same, what are called communications protocols, the way these programs talk to each other for communication. But back in the day, when email first came out, it was first invented in about 1969.
No kidding.
Yeah. So when the predecessor to the internet was something called ARPANET, the Advanced Research Projects Agency Network. And it invented these, basically it was, how would you build a set of networks that could survive warfare? That's what the challenge was. How do you build these little networks so that if I wanted to send a message to you from A to B to C, but B to C was broken, I could send it to A to D, and D would get it to, so how would you route these packets to eventually get to the destination if links went down? And, and when it was released in 1969, it was a virtual terminal. How could I connect to another computer? It was file transfer, and it was email, a simple mail transfer protocol. So that's when email started, 69. I got involved with it in 75 when I was at Wharton, PhD student at Wharton. Essentially, the dean came up to me and said, "I hear you know something about computers." Yeah. He said, well, he'd come from MIT. He'd been a dean at MIT. He said, "We're going to get a new DEC System 10 at Wharton. I wanted the ARPANET. Here's the place to go in Boston. Go figure out how to do it." And we were actually the 75th node on the ARPANET. While you and I have been talking, there's probably been 7,500 nodes added, right?
Right.
Millions and millions, but we were node number 70. I was very lucky. I mean, it's just very, very lucky. But by the early 80s, all of the major vendors had their own email systems. IBM, DEC, Wang, they didn't talk to each other. We became the glue in the middle to connect them together. So we serviced the large companies who had different email systems, and we connect them together. But by the early 90s, I realized, hey, this problem's going to go away. We were a founding member of the Internet Society. Softswitch was. It seems kind of strange, but there was something called the Internet Society in like the early 80s, and we were one of 25 members. And so I could see this is not a long-term company. And so we sold it to Lotus Development because they needed all that integration for Lotus Notes. Mm-hmm. It was a fun company, grew to about 450 employees around the world.
Who was sending emails back then? Was this more like internally, people could send them in their company?
Totally.
And yeah.
Totally. So it was all about internal communications. And then people started thinking about external.
Then following on this path a little bit longer, Lotus buys Softswitch, then IBM buys them, right? And then you're working for IBM. And then personally, things got a little bit more challenging for you, right? You became a single parent, and all of a sudden, it sounds like you had to make a decision and on work-life balance. I don't think people talked about that a lot in the mid 90s,
right?
But you had to make that decision. So I'm interested in how challenging that was for you at that time in your career, and maybe what advice you have for people that think about that.
Again, a very easy decision. When Lotus acquired Softswitch, I didn't move my family to Boston. They were here. My kids were quite young. I had 3 children at the time, all probably 6, 9, and 12 or something, maybe even younger than that. And so when my former wife died, I sure as heck wasn't going to move my kids to Boston. Mm-hmm. So no, I'm not moving. And to IBM's credit, I went to IBM and I said, look, I need to leave the company. I'm a single parent. I just need to do this. And my boss at the time was a wonderful guy named John Thompson. He looked at me and he said, Mike, you're in no position to be making any sort of decision like this. So we're not going to have this conversation. Whatever you want to do at IBM, you can do. If you want to work part-time, you can work part-time. You can work full-time. We value the contribution you can make. So my kids stayed here. I stayed here and I commuted back and forth. I actually flew over the World Trade Center literally 10 minutes before.
Wow.
Literally. I was flying over. I was in a U.S. airplane, sitting next to a woman who had never flown before. And I was pointing down to the World Trade Center. Landed in Logan. Everything's fine. By the time I got to my office at Lotus, like the world was coming apart. My secretary was, in tears and stuff. So I commuted
Did
back.
one of those planes come from Logan? If I'm thinking about that, one of those planes come from Logan, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And in fact, so my daughter was frantic thinking I was on that plane, but the phone lines were so crowded you couldn't get through. So you actually couldn't get through. I remarried by then. You couldn't get through to her stepmother for several hours. And it was like, no, Dad's fine.
Right.
Strange times.
Definitely.
But again, it wasn't in the context of things, blood's thicker than water, right? I mean, your kids first.
How did that experience impact how you lead and how you manage to this day?
Well, first of all, I mean, everyone talks about leadership versus management. What's the difference? And there's probably a million definitions of leadership versus management. But the best I've ever heard is that managers deal with complexity and leaders deal with change. And at IBM, it was so complex, people were consumed managing.
Right.
There wasn't a lot of time left to deal with change. I mean, it was like unbelievably complex organization. So, I would say, it teaches you to be more at peace with yourself. Like, work out, I used to say to my kids, things always have a way of working out. And my daughter would say to me, Dad, you always say that. And I said, let me finish it. Things work out because people work on things until they work out. Right. I would say one of the things that I will say is I am very, very persistent. I don't give up. I just keep coming back at it. And, you learn a lot in adversity. Learn to have a little more confidence in yourself, and somehow you put one foot in front of the other and muddle through.
So I'll get you out of here I have one quote that I read in an old New York Times article. You probably know the article I'm referencing, but so they were talking about, this was written in 1997, this article. And you said, I probably spend 1 to 3 hours each day on email. It's incredibly productive.
Right.
Now, I think of what people think of their email these days. Nobody calls it productive, right?
I mean, I got to tell you something, Dean. So I have 2 email accounts, Golf Genius, mdzisman@gmail.com. If I were to go look at it right now, given that you've been on the phone, you and I have been on the phone for about an hour, there's probably 30 new messages. Not one of them is a real email from someone I know to me.
Right.
Last email marketing. So it's certainly not today. On the other hand, imagine living without it. I mean,
of course.
One thing I will say is the pace of business is very, very fast because people can instantly communicate. Right now, today is as much on Zoom. Like, you and I are here on a Zoom session. Mm-hmm. Are we on GoToMeeting? We're on Zoom.
we ended up on Zoom.
Passing the night there for a moment. There's absolutely no latency, right? We could be moved. And so when I have, Zoom meetings, which I do every single day, with say the development team in Romania, or we have people in Australia, or you're on a Zoom meeting with people in Australia, people in Romania, people in the UK, and people here. It's like you're all in the same room.
Right.
Hats off to Zoom. They scaled it unbelievably. So the technology allows us to be incredibly productive. And if we're not careful, it consumes us. It just consumes you. You're never offline. And so I think a lot of people get good at saying there have to be boundaries, right? There just have to be boundaries, where I'm just, not a slave to my computer. And
I think to learning more about your history back then, when you basically said you were going to work from home or you were going to do a lot, that email let that happen, right? Just like people working from home now, Zoom is letting that happen, right?
No, I mean, seriously, when I was confronted with this situation, my wife became ill and died quite suddenly. So it wasn't a lot of planning. And here's 3 young kids. I wanted to continue working, but I absolutely, in those early days, had to stay with them. I wasn't going to travel. And so I literally, lived on email.
Well, Mike, thanks for your time. It was great talking to you. I'm glad we got to have this conversation.
Likewise, Dane. I appreciate what you're doing with this podcast. And as you know, you were one of our early customers.
Yep.
Very early customers who had faith in us. So I deeply appreciate it.
That's why it's great being partner with you guys. So I appreciate that. So we'll do it again. Thanks, Mike.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Golf Professional Growth Project. Be sure to rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and head to golfprofessionalgrowth.com for updates from GPG.